Aldric Monroe and Seraphina Monroe had planned a romantic escape to Melbourne, but within days, their dream getaway twisted into a nightmare of stalking, betrayal, and a hunt through the unforgiving wilderness. What began as a peaceful vacation became a deadly game engineered by a hidden predator who watched their every move. Their names would soon ignite one of the most chilling manhunts Australia had ever seen.
Aldric Monroe had always imagined that traveling with Seraphina to another continent would be the reset their marriage needed. For months, he felt the distance growing between them. Unspoken frustrations, quiet dinners, and conversations that ended too quickly. When he suggested a romantic getaway to Melbourne, Seraphina agreed immediately, almost relieved to escape their routine. They booked the flights, packed their bags, and decided to leave their problems behind in Texas, believing that the change of scenery might heal what had fractured between them. The moment they landed in Melbourne, the atmosphere felt different. The crisp coastal air, the muted hum of the airport, and the soft morning light all seemed to welcome them into a calmer world. For Seraphina, the trip felt like a breath of fresh hope. For Aldric, it felt like a last chance. He tried to convince himself that everything could return to the way it used to be, even if part of him feared it was too late. They checked into Solara Crest Hotel, an elegant building perched near the coastline. Portia Larkins, the receptionist, greeted them with a cheerful warmth that momentarily eased the tension between them. The room had wide windows that overlooked the shore, where waves crawled toward the sand in a steady rhythm. Seraphina admired the view, photographing the sunlit water, while Aldric unpacked in silence, reminding himself to be patient and present. Their first day appeared promising. They wandered through Melbourne's lively streets, explored small cafes, and visited the famed Brighton Beach. The colorful beach sheds lined the shoreline, creating a vibrant backdrop for Seraphina's photos. She wandered from one shed to another, capturing their bold patterns, while Aldric observed her from a distance. For the first time in months, she seemed genuinely happy. It was during these moments that Aldric noticed a man standing farther down the beach, staring in their direction. He was tall, with sharp features, dark hair pulled back, and an expression that felt unsettlingly hollow. His hands remained tucked in his coat pockets, and although he didn't approach them, his gaze lingered too long. Aldric brushed it off, telling himself that tourists often watched other tourists. But something about the man's presence felt wrong, like a shadow that didn't belong in the sunlit scene. They continued enjoying their day, but Aldric's mind occasionally drifted back to the stranger. He couldn't pinpoint why the man unsettled him. Perhaps it was the stillness, the fixed stare, or the way he disappeared behind a row of sheds the moment Aldric looked directly at him. Back at the hotel, they tried to settle into a peaceful evening. Seraphina wanted to pick up a few essentials from a nearby convenience store before bed. Aldric stayed behind, scrolling through the day's photos and appreciating the rare moments of her smile. The room felt quiet. Almost too quiet, as minutes stretched into an hour. He checked the time again, wondering why she was taking longer than expected. Maybe she stopped for tea or decided to explore a nearby street. He tried to remain calm. An hour became 2. The quiet shifted from peaceful to suffocating. Aldric stood at the window, scanning the dimly lit street below for any sign of her. Anxiety crept into his chest, tightening like a fist. He left the room and searched the lobby, where Portia informed him she hadn't seen Seraphina return. Each passing minute chipped away at his ability to stay rational. Aldric stepped outside and walked toward the convenience store she had planned to visit. The streets were calm, lit by yellow street lamps and the occasional passing car. The store clerk told him she had been there earlier, buying a few items before stepping outside again. That was the last time anyone saw her. Panic replaced every other emotion. Aldric paced through alleys, scanned sidewalks, and shouted her name into the quiet night, even though he knew she wouldn't answer. He tried calling her phone repeatedly, but it only rang without being picked up. The more he searched, the more reality pressed on him. Seraphina had vanished. When he returned to the hotel, he informed Portia, his voice trembling as he attempted to explain that his wife had not come back. She immediately called the police, and an officer arrived shortly after midnight to gather basic information. Aldric attempted to stay calm as he recounted Seraphina's last known steps. Each question felt like a test he wasn't prepared for. What direction did she walk? What time did she leave? Who was the last person she spoke to? He tried to answer, but the fear made his memory feel fogged. The officer advised him to stay inside the hotel and wait for updates. But Aldric couldn't sleep. He paced the room, replaying every moment of the day. He wondered if he had missed something, some sign, some warning that could have prevented her disappearance. The image of the man from the beach drifted into his thoughts again. His expression, the lingering stare, the way he disappeared behind a row of sheds the moment Aldric looked directly at him. He tried to convince himself that it was unrelated, just a tourist or passerby who happened to look our way. But an instinct deep inside whispered that the man had meant something. Hours passed with no word. The sky slowly lightened with dawn, but instead of bringing comfort, it only intensified the dread. Aldric walked to the window, staring at the waves rolling onto the shore. The beauty of the scene now felt cruel, indifferent to the chaos unfolding in his life. He clenched the railing tightly, forcing himself not to break down. As the morning sun rose, Aldric felt a growing certainty. Something terrible had happened to Seraphina. Their trip, once meant to restore their love, had turned into a nightmare he couldn't escape. The city felt too large, too unfamiliar, too capable of swallowing a person whole. He didn't know where she was, who had taken her, or whether she was still alive. But he knew one thing with absolute clarity. He would not leave Melbourne without finding her.
Detective Rowan Hale arrived at Solara Crest Hotel with the calm, measured presence that came from years of witnessing panic, heartbreak, and the darkest corners of human behavior. His eyes scanned the lobby before settling on Aldric Monroe, who looked exhausted, shaken, and trapped inside a storm of fear. Rowan had worked enough missing person cases to know that the first 24 hours were the most important, and every moment lost tightened the window of hope. Aldric struggled to recount the timeline, stumbling through details as though his mind refused to stay still. Rowan listened carefully, noting the tremor in his hands, the lack of sleep etched into his face, and the underlying strain in his voice. Though these signs were expected from a worried husband, Rowan remained neutral. Experience had taught him that anyone could hide something: fear, guilt, or secrets buried deep enough to distort the truth. A team was sent to the convenience store Seraphina had visited. The clerk confirmed she had bought a few items and walked out alone. Rowan replayed the store's CCTV footage on a small monitor. Seraphina appeared calm, unaware that these captured seconds would become critical evidence. When she stepped out of the frame, Rowan felt the weight of the unknown pressing in. Outside the store's cameras, anything could have happened. Police discovered her abandoned belongings 2 blocks away. Her purse lay discarded on the ground, the strap sliced as though ripped off. Her phone was shattered. A faint smear of blood marked the zipper. These clues didn't fit the pattern of a robbery, especially since her wallet and jewelry were untouched. Rowan crouched near the purse and studied the scene. Noticing that the blood smear was small, likely from a quick injury, not something fatal. Still, its presence signaled danger. Forensic specialist Dr. Mirella Voss arrived to examine the evidence. She worked with precision, taking samples, marking footprints, and scanning the pavement for fibers or debris. Her face remained expressionless, but Rowan sensed her concern. They both knew the discovery was troubling. Seraphina had been taken quickly, without time to react, and whoever abducted her likely planned the attack. At the station, Rowan reviewed neighboring street cameras. Hours passed as he and his team tracked movement along different routes. Then, a breakthrough emerged. A grainy camera captured Seraphina walking toward an alley shortly before she disappeared. Less than a minute later, another figure entered the same alley. He moved with purpose and kept his head low. Rowan zoomed in on the image. The man's posture, clothing, and build resembled someone Aldric had mentioned briefly, a stranger watching them at Brighton Beach.
Rowan paused the frame and studied the man's face. It was partially obscured, but the cold stillness in his expression was unmistakable. This was not a random passerby. This was someone with intent. Identifying him proved difficult. No official records matched his features. No job, no address, no digital trace. He appeared like a ghost moving through the city, visible only when captured by coincidence. Rowan's suspicion gradually expanded beyond the mysterious man. He began to examine Aldric more closely. Stress could make anyone appear unstable, but something about Aldric's reactions seemed conflicted. When Rowan asked probing questions about Seraphina's habits, relationships, or potential threats, Aldric hesitated too long. He stumbled over some answers, avoided others. While this behavior alone didn't imply guilt, it hinted at deeper issues within the marriage. When Rowan interviewed hotel staff, Portia Larkins mentioned something subtle yet important. She recalled Aldric asking about nearby pharmacies, tourist spots, and late-night stores days before the trip, but Seraphina always appeared surprised by his suggestions. Rowan interpreted this as miscommunication or disconnect between them, small cracks that could grow into significant revelations. Then forensic analysis introduced an unexpected twist. The blood on Seraphina's purse did not belong only to her. Dr. Mirella Voss confirmed there were faint traces from an older case. The DNA matched a missing backpacker named Lydia Wexley, who had vanished 2 years earlier near Melbourne. No one had found her. No body, no belongings, only a cold case left to collect dust. The discovery shocked the entire investigative team. It meant one of 3 things. The same person responsible for Lydia's disappearance had targeted Seraphina. Lydia had somehow been involved in the struggle, or someone was attempting to link the cases intentionally. Rowan felt unease tightening in his chest. A predator who operated for years without being caught could easily target another victim. Rowan returned to question Aldric once more. The husband admitted he had seen a strange man watching them several times, at the beach, near a cafe, even at the tram station. Rowan asked why he hadn't mentioned this before. Aldric claimed he didn't want to sound paranoid and didn't believe the man was connected. The explanation made sense, but it didn't sit well with Rowan. Too many details were being withheld, intentionally or not. Digging deeper into Aldric and Seraphina's background, Rowan found cracks beneath their seemingly ordinary marriage. Credit card statements revealed recent financial stress, arguments over spending, and an expensive travel package booked impulsively. There were signs of tension, possibly even conflict. Nothing criminal, but enough to complicate the narrative. The investigation reached another turning point when more CCTV footage emerged. In the hours before Seraphina vanished, the same mysterious man was captured near the hotel back entrance. He didn't enter. He only watched the lobby from across the street before disappearing around the corner. Rowan replayed the footage several times, watching how calculated his movements were. He never looked up, never hesitated. Stalking behavior often followed this pattern: slow, deliberate, patient. While Rowan headed the main investigation, Dr. Voss found more concerning evidence. A fabric fiber recovered from Seraphina's purse matched a type of material used in hiking gear. This detail seemed insignificant until a ranger contacted police about a suspicious campsite abandoned recently in Dandenong National Park. Inside the campsite were traces of the same fabric and footprints resembling those from the alley. Rowan studied the prints carefully. They suggested a heavy, steady step, possibly someone familiar with rugged terrain. The mysterious man was beginning to look less like a city predator and more like someone who moved fluidly between urban and wilderness environments. As clues mounted, Rowan felt the gravity of the case intensify. Seraphina's disappearance was no random crime. A calculated mind was at work. Someone who planned, stalked, and executed without mistakes. Someone who blended into crowds yet could vanish without a trace. And with each passing hour, the chances of finding Seraphina alive grew thinner. Rowan understood the harsh reality of these cases, yet he refused to step back. Every clue, every footprint, every second of footage mattered now. He sensed the story had just begun revealing itself, and beneath the surface waited secrets darker than anyone was prepared for.
The search moved from the city's busy streets to the vast wilderness on the outskirts of Melbourne. New CCTV footage placed the mysterious man boarding a tram headed toward the Dandenong Ranges, a sprawling national park filled with deep trails, quiet creeks, and thick forests where a person could vanish without leaving a trace. Detective Rowan Hale understood immediately that this changed everything. Urban kidnappings left trails, cameras, witnesses, movement patterns. Forest abductions left silence. A search team was deployed at first light. Kellen Stroud, a weathered and highly respected ranger, joined them. He knew the Dandenong terrain better than anyone and recognized the danger that lurked within its endless greenery. When Rowan showed him the blurred image of the man seen with Seraphina, Kellen admitted something chilling. Several hikers had complained in recent months about a man lingering near campsites, watching from a distance. They described him as calm, quiet, and unsettlingly expressionless. Kellen filed the reports, but since no crimes were committed and the man always left before anyone could confront him, the concerns faded into routine paperwork. Now it seemed those warnings might have been far more serious. Search dogs soon picked up a trail along a narrow footpath. The scent matched fibers from Seraphina's clothing found near the alley. The path was rugged, with overgrown sections and exposed roots, but the dogs pulled forward with urgency. Rowan felt both dread and hope tightening within him. If the dogs were on the right track, Seraphina had been here, but whether he passed through alive or injured remained a heavy question burning in the back of his mind. A few kilometers in, the team found a torn strip of fabric snagged on a branch. Dr. Morella Voss examined it and confirmed the match. Seraphina had moved through the forest, likely struggling. The piece was ripped unevenly, suggesting force rather than accidental tearing. Rowan swallowed the grim realization someone had dragged or forced her deeper into the wilderness. They moved farther along until the dogs abruptly changed direction, pulling toward a hidden clearing covered with tall ferns. When they reached it, the reaction from the dogs turned frantic. Everyone prepared for the worst, expecting to find a body, but instead, they discovered something even more disturbing, a buried metal box. After carefully unearthing it, Dr. Morella Voss opened the lid. Inside were items wrapped in plastic to protect them from moisture. A bracelet, tarnished but intact, a faded driver's license belonging to a tourist who disappeared the year before, several folded photographs of unfamiliar women taken from a distance, some at bus stops, others at cafes, others at beaches. Each photograph showed the same pattern, the subject unaware, captured during ordinary moments, observed without knowledge. The last photograph in the stack chilled Rowan. It showed Seraphina Monroe standing at the airport terminal in Texas weeks before the trip. She was looking at her phone, innocent and unguarded. The realization hit Rowan and the entire team hard. She had been stalked long before arriving in Australia, long before setting foot on foreign soil. The abduction was not a sudden crime of opportunity. It was a long, planned pursuit. This discovery shifted the investigation entirely. The mysterious man wasn't just someone who noticed Seraphina during her stay. He had selected her as a target long before. The question now wasn't simply who he was, but how deeply he had infiltrated the couple's lives. As they continued searching the clearing, Kellen pointed out something Rowan had missed: 2 sets of footprints. One set matched the boots worn by the man in the CCTV footage. The other set was nearly identical in size and tread, but not quite. Slightly different weight distribution. slightly different stride length. Rowan bent down and studied the prints more closely. Once the measurements were taken, forensic comparison confirmed what seemed impossible. The second set of footprints matched Aldric Monroe. Rowan felt his pulse spike. The husband had been in the forest recently. Whether he had gone willingly, unwillingly, or unknowingly remained unclear. Aldric had claimed he knew nothing about the forest or any connection to it, yet the evidence contradicted his statements. The discovery introduced a dangerous, new layer to the investigation. Either Aldric had been in the forest without mentioning it, or someone was using shoes identical to his own. The latter was possible, but unlikely. The former could indicate deception. Rowan returned to the hotel to confront Aldric. The man's reaction was a mixture of fear and confusion. He denied ever being in the forest. He insisted the footprint evidence must be wrong or manipulated. Rowan could sense the desperation in his voice, not the desperation of guilt, but the desperation of someone cornered by something he didn't fully understand. Pressure forced Aldric to reveal something he had been hiding. Months before the trip, he had met someone who threatened to expose him for an affair he had secretly ended. The man, Elias Crane, claimed to possess photos, messages, and recordings that would ruin his marriage. Aldric had panicked, agreeing to meet Elias several times. During their tense encounters, Elias demanded only one thing: information about Seraphina. Aldric admitted he had, in moments of fear, shared details about her schedule, their travel plans, and even their hotel reservations. He insisted he never knew Elias planned anything violent or criminal. Rowan listened but remained cautious. A panicked husband could easily tell a story that helped him appear like a victim rather than an accomplice. Aldric's confession, however, explained why he withheld information earlier. Shame, fear, and guilt had twisted his judgment. Rowan took note of the pattern. Elias had manipulated Aldric, using personal leverage to pull him into something dark. Back in the forest, the search continued with renewed intensity. Kellen guided teams through increasingly isolated terrain. The further they moved, the more signs they found: broken branches, disturbed soil, boot prints leading deeper into dangerous ground. Each clue pointed toward a predator who knew how to vanish into wild areas and reappear without warning. Rowan feared they were running out of time. Seraphina had been transported far from city limits, hidden in a place where screams could be swallowed by the trees. The forest itself became an accomplice, masking paths and distorting sound. As evening shadows stretched across the landscape, Rowan stood at the edge of a steep ridge overlooking the treetops. He felt the heavy truth pressing down on him. Seraphina wasn't just lost. She was trapped in a predator's territory, and every clue showed that they were up against someone who planned every move carefully. The deeper they searched, the more Rowan sensed they were approaching not just the abductor, but a larger, more sinister pattern hidden behind the threads of the case. The next discovery, he knew, would either bring them closer to saving Seraphina or reveal something far more devastating. The search stretched into its second full day when a surprising report came through the local ranger station. A hiker claimed to have seen a woman resembling Seraphina not far from a remote, unmarked cabin deep within the forest. The witness described her as moving slowly, as though injured or exhausted, and accompanied by a man who kept a controlling distance behind her. The description was vague, but the details aligned too closely with what Rowan already suspected. The team immediately shifted their focus toward the northwestern quadrant of Dandenong Ranges, an area known for rugged terrain and abandoned structures left behind by old logging operations. Detective Rowan Hale traveled with Kellen Stroud and a small unit of officers. The deeper they went, the less sunlight reached the ground. Thick branches intertwined overhead, creating an almost oppressive canopy. Every noise felt amplified: a snapping twig, a rustling bush, a distant bird call. Rowan felt tension coil in his chest as he imagined Seraphina somewhere nearby, possibly hiding, injured, or trapped.
He refused to allow his mind to consider the worst outcome, but it clung to the edges of his thoughts like a dark shadow. When they finally reached the cabin, it stood crooked and weathered, its wood rotting from years of moisture. The windows were covered with grime, and the door hung slightly ajar. Rowan motioned for silence as they approached. They entered the cabin carefully, prepared for confrontation, but found it empty. Still, the sense that someone had been there recently was undeniable. Inside, the air carried a faint scent of smoke and freshly disturbed soil. Food wrappers lay near a makeshift sleeping area, and footprints scattered across the dusty floor. Dr. Marella Voss examined the scene as soon as she arrived. She noticed rope fibers caught on a broken bedpost that matched fibers from Seraphina's torn shirt. The evidence was clear. She had been restrained here. More unsettling was the second part of the discovery. Beneath a worn-out rug in the corner, Dr. Voss uncovered a hidden trapdoor, concealed beneath discarded clothing and debris. Rowan felt a cold rush of dread sweep through him. Cabins like this often held dark secrets, but the presence of a built-in hiding space suggested something premeditated, something far more sinister than a moment of panic or disorganized violence. They pried open the trap door and found a narrow ladder descending into a dim underground room. The walls were cement, rough and uneven. The space was small but organized, lit by a single battery-operated lantern. And within the room lay evidence that turned the already chilling case into something even darker. There were hand restraints bolted into the wall, a mattress stained by old dirt, a stack of photographs similar to those found in the metal box, women captured in candid moments unaware being watched. Not just tourists, but locals as well. Some faces looked terrified in the last photographs taken, likely moments before disappearing. Rowan recognized one of the women, Lydia Wexley, the missing backpacker whose blood had appeared on Seraphina's purse. Next to the photos were journal entries written in a tight, controlled handwriting. The entries described a chosen one selected through observation. Pages detailed routines, behaviors, vulnerabilities, and emotional patterns of the targeted victims. Seraphina's name appeared repeatedly, often accompanied by disturbing phrases describing her as a prize, an answer, or someone who needed to be claimed. The most alarming section referred to a cooperative partner, someone who unknowingly, or perhaps knowingly, helped the predator gain access to certain victims. The entries hinted that this partner provided information about routines, travel details, and safe opportunities to approach targets without drawing suspicion. When Rowan read the passages referencing Aldric Monroe, his stomach tightened. They were not explicit, but the connection was undeniable. The entry spoke of a man who spoke out of fear, who offered insight through panic conversations, believing he was protecting himself without understanding the larger plan. Rowan felt the weight of these words. Aldric had admitted being in contact with the stalker, but now the truth began to take shape in a far more horrifying way. Footprints inside the cabin only intensified suspicion. 2 sets matched Elias Crane. The third set, confirmed through comparison, belonged to Aldric. Rowan knew that Aldric's presence could be explained by coercion, but it could also reveal a darker implication. That Aldric had been part of the predator's plan long before realizing the consequences. Rowan needed answers quickly. He rushed back to Solara Crest Hotel to confront Aldric again. When Aldric saw Rowan return, his face went pale. He understood without being told that something had been found. Under the pressure of evidence, Aldric surrendered the truth he had tried to bury beneath fear and guilt. He revealed that Elias Crane had been blackmailing him for months. The affair Aldric had once hoped no one would ever discover had become the key Elias used to manipulate him. Elias threatened to expose Aldric unless he complied. At first, the request seemed harmless. Details about Seraphina's work schedule, her habits, her emotional state. But gradually, Elias asked for more. Travel plans, hotel reservations, the timing of their outings. Aldric had been trapped in the cycle of fear, believing that if he refused, everything in his life would crumble.
Aldric insisted he never knew Elias intended to kidnap or harm Seraphina. He thought the stalker was obsessed with control, not violence. But Rowan questioned whether Aldric truly believed that. The desperation in Elias's eyes suggested that he knew, deep down, that something terrible could happen, but ignored the truth because he was too afraid of losing everything. Rowan returned to the forest with the new information. He felt the pressure of time like a weight on his chest. Every clue suggested that Seraphina was close, yet the vast forest seemed designed to conceal her forever. Kellen guided the team deeper, toward unmarked trails rarely used by hikers. As they approached a ravine, they found fresh disturbances in the dirt: broken branches, crushed leaves, and hurried footprints. Elias Crane had been here recently. A trail of blood droplets led toward the edge of the ravine, where they discovered signs of a fall. Rowan peered over and saw a human figure sprawled on the rocks below. Elias Crane had fallen and was barely conscious, injured but alive. When officers reached him, he clutched Seraphina's bracelet in his hand. His breathing was shallow, his face streaked with dirt and blood. He muttered incoherently, but one phrase became clear. He was not the mastermind. He insisted that someone else had been controlling everything. Someone who knew how to disappear, how to manipulate, how to push others like pieces on a board. Rowan stared down at the broken man and felt a chill run through him. If Elias wasn't the true predator, then the real orchestrator was still out there, possibly watching, possibly fleeing, possibly preparing for the next victim. And Seraphina's fate remained painfully uncertain, hanging in the balance as the investigation pushed into even darker territory. The discovery of Elias Crane alive but severely injured sent shockwaves through the investigation. Paramedics worked quickly to lift him from the ravine, stabilizing his fragile body as Rowan Hale watched with a mix of frustration and grim determination. Elias's claims about not being the true mastermind gnawed at Rowan's instincts. The cabin, the hidden room, the journals, everything suggested someone with meticulous planning and a deep, disturbing fascination. Elias had clearly played a role, but perhaps only as a pawn. The question that now loomed over the entire team was unsettling. If Elias wasn't pulling the strings, who was? While Elias was transported to a nearby hospital under heavy security, Rowan and Kellen Stroud remained in the forest. A faint trail leading away from the ravine hinted that someone else had been present during the fall, someone who escaped before the officers arrived. Rowan crouched near the disturbed soil, examining footprints of two distinct sizes. One belonged to Elias, the other was smaller, lighter, and moved in a hurried, almost frantic pattern. The stride length suggested a woman, but Seraphina's feet had been bare earlier, and these footprints showed the tread of boots. This was someone else entirely, someone who likely witnessed Elias's fall and fled into the dense brush. The trail grew harder to follow as the terrain became increasingly rugged. The canopy overhead thickened, plunging the forest floor into a shadowy gloom. Rowan felt unsettled by the oppressive silence that settled around them. Even the birds seemed hesitant to call out. It was as if the forest itself held its breath, waiting for what the search team would uncover next. Kellen motioned toward a cluster of boulders shaped like jagged teeth jutting from the earth. There, half concealed by moss, lay a scarf made of fine wool, the fabric smeared with dirt and faint streaks of dried blood. Rowan bagged the scarf carefully. It didn't belong to Seraphina, nor did it match anything Aldric or Elias would have worn. It belonged to a woman, likely the same one whose boots left the footprints. This new discovery added a chilling layer of complexity to the case. Someone else was out here, someone connected deeply enough to Elias to remain close, but distant enough to escape unnoticed. Rowan suspected she was the cooperative partner referenced in the journals, not Aldric, but someone far more involved. Back at the incident command center, tension permeated the air.
Dr. Morella Voss analyzed the scarf and confirmed it contained 3 separate blood traces: Elias's, an unknown female, and a third trace too faint to identify but possibly linked to another long-missing woman from prior cases. The evidence pointed to an accomplice, someone who participated in the stalking, kidnapping, and possible killing of multiple victims. Rowan felt a cold certainty settle over him. They had stumbled onto something larger than the disappearance of Seraphina. This was a network built on obsession and control, one that had operated in secret for years. When Rowan visited Elias in the hospital, the man was conscious, but heavily medicated. His eyes flickered with fear when Rowan mentioned the unidentified woman. Elias's breathing quickened when he admitted she was the true architect behind the crimes. Her name, he whispered, was Arcadia Vale. She was someone he had met years ago during outdoor survival courses. She was intensely private, intelligent, and disturbingly fascinated with human behavior. Elias claimed she manipulated him with a mix of fear, charm, and psychological conditioning, gradually pulling him into her schemes. Arcadia chose the victims. Elias performed the surveillance. Together, they built the patterns that allowed them to isolate and capture women without detection. According to Elias, she was the one who orchestrated Seraphina's kidnapping. She viewed Seraphina as a rare type, someone with quiet strength and emotional resilience that she found captivating. Rowan felt sickened by the level of calculation involved. Every moment of the couple's vacation, from their arrival at the airport to their stroll through the markets, had been monitored. Elias insisted that Arcadia planned to keep Seraphina alive longer than previous victims, claiming she wanted to study her. Rowan pressed for Seraphina's location, but Elias only shook his head weakly. Arcadia moved her hiding places often. She anticipated every search pattern, every police strategy, and every likely avenue of escape. Rowan realized they were dealing with someone who thrived on staying steps ahead, someone who used the forest's natural labyrinth to her advantage. With Arcadia identified, efforts ramped up dramatically. Kellen and multiple units combed the forests, searching for new cabins, hidden shelters, or recent campsites. Drones skimmed the canopy, scanning for smoke or unusual clearings. Bloodhounds followed faint trails that abruptly ended, as if Arcadia deliberately masked them. The chase felt endless, a cat-and-mouse pursuit where every lead dissolved into the next. Just as frustration threatened to break the team's resolve, Dr. Morella made an unexpected breakthrough. She discovered that the photographs found beneath the cabin not only documented victims, but also contained coded patterns. A sequence of numbers, positions of trees, angles of sunlight, and distances between landmarks formed a map. When plotted, the map led to a section of the forest previously dismissed as inaccessible due to steep cliffs. Rowan and Kellen immediately mobilized a team toward the location. Trekking across treacherous terrain, they reached a narrow ledge hugging the side of a cliff. At first glance, it appeared to lead nowhere, just a dead end. But when Rowan examined the rock closely, he noticed faint scuff marks. Someone had passed through often enough to leave subtle traces. Following the ledge carefully, they reached a concealed rock opening disguised by branches and thick foliage. Inside, the air turned cooler, and the narrow passage led into a cavern-like shelter. Rowan's heart pounded as he scanned the dim interior illuminated by their flashlights. Near the back of the cavern, they found blankets, food containers, and a lantern. And a silver necklace belonging to Seraphina. It was recent. Too recent. Rowan felt a surge of adrenaline. Seraphina had been here, possibly only hours earlier, but she wasn't here now. And neither was Arcadia. But on the wall, scrawled in dirt with a trembling hand, were 2 chilling words. A gray dawn settled over the Dandenong Ranges as the search entered its most critical phase. Rowan Hale stood at the forest's edge, absorbing the weight of what Arcadia Vale's message implied. The chilling words etched into the cavern wall confirmed she was not panicked, not fleeing blindly, but operating with cold intention. Seraphina was alive somewhere in this wilderness, and Arcadia was moving her like a piece on a board only she understood. Rowan felt the urgency settle into his bones. Every minute mattered now. Teams spread across the ridgelines, sweeping outward from the cavern in careful grids. Kellen Stroud led the lead unit alongside Rowan, both men working in a silent rhythm shaped by urgency. The forest felt different now, tense, aware, as though it held the echo of Arcadia's watching presence. Birds erupted and fell silent in strange patterns, and subtle disturbances in the underbrush hinted at recent movement. Kellen paused near a patch of flattened ferns and pointed out a thin, broken branch hanging at an angle. It was a sign, too subtle for the untrained eye, but unmistakable to a ranger who knew how the forest should look. Rowan followed the faint trail, his pulse quickening as he noticed small bundles of crushed leaves. They were placed deliberately, like markers. Arcadia had used natural elements to conceal signs of movement while leaving coded signals only she could interpret. But after hours of tracking her, Rowan began to see a rhythm, a pattern in her misdirection. Arcadia doubled back often and zigzagged through difficult terrain, but she always gravitated toward higher ground. It offered visibility, it offered control, it offered a vantage point to watch her hunters. The terrain shifted from dense underbrush to rockier slopes covered in weathered eucalyptus trees. The air grew thinner, cooler, and more unsettlingly still. Rowan checked his map and realized they were approaching one of the range's most isolated peaks, a place with sparse foot traffic and steep drops on 3 sides. Kellen confirmed a few hikers ventured there because of hazardous cliffs and sudden gusts of wind that made footing treacherous. If Arcadia wanted seclusion, this was where she would go. A sudden call came through Rowan's radio from a unit stationed lower on the slope. They had discovered something. Shoe impressions partially filled with loose soil. The pattern matched Seraphina's previous footwear. Rowan exhaled in relief. She was still being moved, still alive, still leaving traces despite Arcadia's attempts to erase them. As Rowan followed the trail, he found a second clue. A torn strip of fabric caught on a jagged branch. It was from Seraphina's shirt, and this piece held a faint, smeared print of her hand, likely from bracing herself during a stumble. Dr. Morella Voss joined Rowan and confirmed the blood smear was recent. Fresh fear sharpened Rowan's focus. Seraphina was injured, exhausted, and being marched through unforgiving terrain. They needed to reach her before Arcadia forced her over another ledge or deeper into an untraceable hiding place. As the day wore on, dark clouds pushed across the sky. The temperature dropped, and a thin mist crept over the treetops. The forest dimmed with ominous speed. Visibility dwindled to a few meters, and the trail seemed to dissolve into the fog. The search teams tightened formation, moving more carefully as the world shrank to a gray shroud. Rowan sensed Arcadia would use the weather to her advantage. Mist meant concealment. Concealment meant control. Kellen led them toward a narrow passage between 2 cliff faces. The space was tight and shadowed, with jagged rock walls rising like sentinels. Rowan noticed scuff marks along one edge, signs of someone squeezing through recently. He moved ahead, ducking under stone outcroppings until the passage widened into a plateau overlooking a chasm. The wind howled through the gap below, carrying the echo of rushing water far beneath. Then Rowan froze. Across the plateau, barely visible through the fog, was a makeshift shelter, a lean-to constructed from branches, tarp fragments, and stones. It blended into the environment so well it nearly vanished entirely. Rowan approached cautiously, scanning for traps or warning signs. When he reached the shelter, he braced himself before lifting the flap. Inside, lying weakly on a bed of foliage, was Seraphina Monroe. She was pale, shivering and covered in cuts and bruises. But she was alive. Her breathing was unsteady, her eyes barely open, but relief flickered across her face at the sight of Rowan. Immediately, Rowan signaled for medics, shouting for blankets, water, and a stretcher. But even as he began checking her injuries, a chilling realization dawned. Where was Arcadia? The shelter was too exposed for a final hideout. It was a temporary resting place, a pause in Arcadia's movement. She had left Seraphina behind, not out of mercy, but because she had grown bored, or because she had chosen her next target. As medics tended to Seraphina, Rowan scanned the plateau, his instincts prickling with unease. The mist thickened until shapes blurred into shadows. The air felt charged with unseen movement. Then Kellen shouted from the edge of the cliff. There, pressed against a rock, was a folded sheet of waterproof paper weighed down by a smooth stone. Rowan unfolded it, reading the chilling message etched in sharp strokes. You found her. Now find me. And underneath, a final line. This is not over. The words struck him with cold clarity. Arcadia had vanished deeper into the wilderness, slipping away like a phantom. She had anticipated the search, anticipated the rescue, anticipated Rowan's deductions. She had relinquished Seraphina, not out of mercy, but because she had grown bored, or because she had chosen her next target. As helicopters arrived to lift Seraphina to safety and search teams expanded their perimeter, Rowan stood at the cliff's edge, staring into the endless fog. The forest below remained still, but he could feel Arcadia's presence lingering like a shadow. She was watching.
The days following Seraphina's rescue unfolded in a haze of tension and unanswered questions. While she recovered in a secured Melbourne hospital, police presence tightened around her room. Rowan Hale visited regularly, trying to assemble the fragmented pieces of what she endured under Arcadia's control. Seraphina could only recall flashes, cold nights, rough terrain, the constant pressure of being watched, and Arcadia's distant figure moving like a phantom. Her injuries told a story of exhaustion and fear, but she insisted that Arcadia rarely touched her. The torment came from being forced to walk endlessly, deprived of rest, and kept in a state of uncertainty that broke time into unrecognizable patterns. Rowan respected the limits of her memory, knowing trauma reshaped perception, but he also knew something crucial was missing. Arcadia's decision to abandon Seraphina clearly had purpose. She was calculating, always several steps ahead. Rowan feared she was already laying the groundwork for whatever came next. Meanwhile, Elias Crane, recovering in another facility under strict surveillance, provided more insight into Arcadia's psychology. He described her childhood spent in isolation, raised by survivalist parents in remote forests. She developed a fascination with human behavior, particularly vulnerability. She sought to understand fear as though it were a language. Elias admitted he had been drawn to her intensity, unaware of how deeply it would trap him. By the time he realized the extent of her cruelty, he was terrified to escape. Elias insisted Arcadia believed she had a purpose beyond simple violence. She viewed herself as someone who exposed the true selves of others through fear. The more Rowan learned, the more convinced he became that Arcadia's conflict with Seraphina wasn't random. Seraphina possessed a calm resilience that intrigued Arcadia. She didn't break easily. She didn't respond with panic. She endured. Arcadia likely saw her as a puzzle she couldn't solve, and that made her both frustrated and captivated. Rowan feared Seraphina's escape might only deepen Arcadia's obsession. As the investigation continued, Kellen Stroud and his search units swept the higher peaks and ravines, tracking any sign of Arcadia. They located 2 abandoned campsites, one containing food wrappers, the other holding a small carved wooden token. The token depicted an eye. Rowan recognized it immediately as Arcadia's symbol, something she carved repeatedly in her journals and on tree trunks near previous victims' locations. This wasn't simply a calling card, it was a message.
She was marking territory, establishing presence, asserting control. Rowan studied the token carefully. The eye looked downward, unlike earlier carvings where it looked straight ahead or upward. Dr. Morella Voss suggested the direction of the gaze might indicate Arcadia's next move. If she followed patterns from her journals, symbolic shifts corresponded to changes in her location or behavioral state. Downward indicated concealment, depth, or retreat. It suggested she had descended into an area less accessible by foot, caves, ravines, or dense thickets the search had not yet breached. An intensified sweep began along the lower slopes. Drone footage revealed unusual disturbances in the vegetation near a deep gully shaped like a horseshoe. Although the area seemed devoid of human activity, Rowan noticed something unsettling, a faint outline in the grass, roughly the size of a human body, as if someone had lain there watching the search teams pass above. He moved in with a small team, following a barely visible trail leading downhill. The path twisted between boulders and thorny shrubs before opening into a narrow clearing shielded by overhanging branches. In the center lay a single object on a flat stone, a piece of ash-blackened cloth. Rowan recognized it immediately. It belonged to Elias Crane. This discovery meant that Arcadia had visited Elias's former campsite after he was taken into custody. It was her way of signaling that she was aware of the investigation's progress. She was taunting them, reminding Rowan she could come and go without being seen. She left no footprints, no tools, no discarded items, only the burned cloth and a trail of cold dread. Rowan realized Arcadia wasn't hiding from them. She was studying them just as she studied her victims. That night, under heavy cloud cover, Rowan returned to his temporary lodging in Melbourne. He reviewed every piece of evidence again, mapping Arcadia's movements, analyzing her psychological patterns, and piecing together her next potential actions. But fatigue weighed on him. His mind drifted uneasily between possibilities. Around midnight, a sharp knock startled him. Talia Marin stood outside his door, her expression grim. A message had been delivered to the station, an envelope left anonymously on the front steps. Inside was a photograph. Seraphina sleeping in her hospital bed. The photo was close enough that Rowan could see the faint stitches on her forehead, the IV taped to her arm. The chilling implication was undeniable. Arcadia had been inside the secured hospital. She had stood near Seraphina, watching her recovery, unnoticed by police guards and surveillance. On the back of the photo, a short phrase was written in fine pen strokes. "She's stronger than I expected. So are you." A deep, simmering fury settled in Rowan's chest. Arcadia had breached security with ease, slipping past layers of protection as though they were illusions. She had walked right into the heart of their guarded space and walked right back out unseen. It was not a demonstration of arrogance. It was a demonstration of power. Rowan understood the real message beneath the written words. Arcadia could reach anyone, anywhere. Security at the hospital tripled overnight. Seraphina was moved to an undisclosed location, shielded from windows. Cameras blocked, access restricted only to a few individuals. Yet Rowan knew these measures were temporary shields. Arcadia didn't rely on force to access her targets. She used psychology, patience, and precision. She adapted quickly. The investigation expanded beyond the forest. Officers examined airports, rental properties, storage units, and train stations. Arcadia could have slipped out of Melbourne, but Rowan doubted it. She wasn't finished with her fascination, not with Seraphina, and not with him. 2 days later, another break came unexpectedly. A hiker found a torn notebook page pinned beneath a rock along a mountain trail. The handwriting was unmistakable. "The forest is honest. People are not. Find me where honesty lives." The phrase sparked recognition in Kellen. He recalled an old, abandoned logging area known for its towering dead trees. Locals called it the honest graveyard because the silence there made it impossible to pretend bravery. Fitting for Arcadia, fitting for a final showdown. A heavy silence settled over Rowan as he prepared to head toward the site. He knew Arcadia chose this place deliberately, not as a battlefield, but as a stage. She wanted to be found. She wanted this confrontation. And Rowan understood that stepping into the honest graveyard meant facing a predator who had never once miscalculated her prey. This chapter of the nightmare was ending. But another, more dangerous one, was already beginning.